In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Crystal Bencken. Come along as Janie Schumaker and Hollye Briggs talk with Crystal about her unexpected entry into nursing, her experiences during 9/11, and her realization that healthcare professionals must practice together to be effective. This episode is called Simulation Education. Let the wild rumpus begin.
Hello, and welcome to the BCEN Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. But most importantly, to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always valuable. I'm Hollye Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Janie Schumaker, CEO at BCEN. Hi, Janie.
Hey, Hollye. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you with us. And in this episode of BCEN and Friends, we have Crystal Bencken. Crystal is an emergency nurse who is creating an environment of learning through simulation. It both engages and educates every person involved, even herself, as she will share with us more very shortly. Janie, could you please introduce us to our BCEN friend, Crystal?
Yes, it would be my pleasure to introduce Crystal. Crystal Bencken is a simulation education manager at Atrium, Health Carolina's Simulation Center, where she leverages 16 years of experience in emergency nursing and trauma to enhance simulation-based education. Her expertise lies in developing projects that emphasize well-equipped to deliver optimal patient care. Crystal, welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you both.
All right, well, we're going to jump right in, Crystal. And I think Hollye and I, we know a little bit about your career, but we want to know more. You've done a lot of amazing things. So tell us about your career in nursing, where some of your travel nursing took you over the years. We definitely want you to touch on that because you've got some really interesting stories there.
Sure. I first got a degree in psychology and knew that I didn't want to go on with that. Nursing was kind of like an accidental thing for me. I kind of fell into it. And so it was a second degree per se, not necessarily a second career, but a second degree. And when I finished, I was living in Kansas City and I had been getting up to go to clinical for 2 years in the snow in the winters. And I had decided I just didn't want anything to do with that anymore. Being up to scrape your windows at, 5:30 in the morning was just not any fun. So myself and a couple of fellow nursing students that were getting ready to graduate, we decided we were going to move to Phoenix, Arizona. We didn't have jobs. We didn't know anything about getting jobs, the market, or anything like that. So kind of just went out there on a whim. And when I went out there, a little bit of a struggle as a new grad trying to find a job. And after several weeks of being out there, I went to a job fair for the county, which has a level 1 trauma center, and was just kind of talking to somebody and talking about some of the work I'd done in nursing school, working for a children's hospital. And she's like, wow, that sounds like, you have some understanding of triage and you have some understanding of prioritizing patients. Have you thought about being an emergency nurse? And I was like, I thought about getting paid. I hadn't really even put any thought into like what kind of nurse I wanted to be per se, but she took me over and I interviewed on the spot with the emergency department nurse manager. And she said, we'd like to hire you. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I'm just going to tell you that. And they didn't tell me at that point in time, they'd never had a new grad in the emergency department. So that created kind of a different environment for me. I was very lucky. I had a very protective preceptor, but I will say that a lot of the other experienced nurses that I worked around didn't really like the idea of a new grad being in the emergency department. That's not where I belonged. I was expected to know my P's and Q's very well. Like it was not uncommon for another coworker to be like, hey, I have this kind of patient. What would you do? Or, I'm getting ready to start this presser. Have you ever done this before? And it wasn't just to give me experience. It was there was a little bit of a challenge to things, like, do I know my stuff? Am I going to learn my stuff? I think it's fair to say in full transparency, I cried a couple times as I was getting myself together. But I saw a lot there. I worked at the Level 1 Trauma Center in Phoenix, Arizona, at the Maricopa County at the time. They've changed names since then. They have a burn center there as well. And so got to see a lot of trauma and a lot of burn, and worked with a lot of very experienced people that helped kind of create the foundation of what I was doing and what being an emergency room nurse was. And probably one of the places that I worked as a teammate and a colleague with residents and physicians and other people, it's probably one of the places I felt like we were the most equal. And expectations were, you didn't wait for a physician's order. You anticipated and asked for it. Hey, what do you think? Should we start this? You were expected to know the whys behind the whats of what you were doing. So I finished up, and I lived there for about 3 years, and I started to kind of get homesick. So I moved back to the Kansas City metropolitan area and kind of tried one Level 1 trauma center in Kansas City and didn't really like that very well. It wasn't as busy as I was used to. So I came upon another trauma center and worked there. It was very busy, and it was what I wanted to do, and got to be a charge nurse there for about a year, and then decided I needed to go and do some travel nursing. And I went to do travel nursing. I started in New York City in August of 2001 and was working at New York Presbyterian in New York City, and was there during 9/11. And myself and my best friend, who was a burn unit nurse, she was at a different facility, but we were both there in New York City traveling together. And it was kind of a unique situation because the burn patients came to the hospital I was working at, and I had a little experience, but that was more her background. And she was down at one of the facilities that was in Lower Manhattan, and she was outside triaging patients, which was more my cup of tea, I guess you would say. But because we knew each other and we talked shop enough, we were able to use each other's knowledge and experiences to kind of help us get through the experiences that we were having during that. I traveled as a nurse for about a year and a half. I came to North Carolina for a while, and then went to Baltimore and then Florida, and decided to come back here to North Carolina for a little bit. Spent some time here for about a year, and then moved back to Kansas City again. Kept thinking I was going to make that Kansas City because that's where my family is. And it turned out that North Carolina was really where I wanted to be and what I liked. So I came back here and worked in the children's emergency department. So oddly enough, in the first part of my career, a lot of the trauma centers I worked in were adult only or predominantly adult. And so it was funny to kind of cross over into a pediatric emergency department and see how that differed, and got to be clinical supervisor, and I got to kind of grow some nurses, and I worked with some really great experienced nurses, but we also were starting to take new grads a little bit more frequently. So I got the opportunity to start growing some of our own. And after doing that for a while, that was I had really identified that was my passion, was helping grow people, help people be more experienced, help them understand those whys behind the whats. So I went back and got my master's degree in nursing education, and I really wanted to be more in the professional development world. While I was in grad school, SIM was starting to become quite a thing, and I did a lot of my projects and things like that related to simulation and best practices, and it made sense to me. I think you're going to ask me what my favorites are. My most favorite thing in the world is Kansas Jayhawks basketball. I like live that, breathe that. It's everything. But with that, I have no athletic ability whatsoever. But watching sports, we coach people. We practice together. If we want to be really good teams, we don't just show up on the day of the game and expect to win it if we haven't ever practiced together. And that was something to me that I found really kind of odd about healthcare, is that we train our physicians in this building over here. We train our nurses over in this building over here. We train our respiratory therapists over here. And then in the most critical moments of someone's life, we all are expected to come together and be a team when we probably haven't practiced together. We don't even know what the team role is. We certainly don't have any, plays per se, and we're supposed to be saving this person's life. And that felt very counterintuitive to me. And sim seemed to be a really good way to allow people to practice that and to get to know each other and to become teammates and to practice those plays or to get more comfortable with things. So an opportunity came up with Carolina Simulation Center, and it was a huge jump because I didn't want to leave emergency nursing. Like, let's be honest, that's pretty cool stuff, right? But it seemed like the right time and the right thing. And I'm so grateful that I did, because where in the past in the emergency department, I could impact a patient, I now can, through the kind of training and stuff that we're doing, I can impact hundreds of patients to thousands of patients by helping people practice to be better at what they're doing.
Crystal, that is an amazing journey that you've had. So many great experiences. And I can't even imagine being a nurse during 9/11, during all that happening. That just must have been mind blowing. You train for it. We learn about disaster management. We all practice it, but to be actually there, wow. What an amazing career you've had so far. And you have so much further to go. You're still making a difference every day.
I guess my follow-up question to all of that is, because you kind of talked about how the door opened for you to go from the emergency department and to walk into simulation. What do you feel made you have the confidence to say, you know what? I feel like I'm a little bit prepared to make that leap into something very different. So what would you say kind of gave you the confidence from your past and your experiences to make that leap into simulation?
That's a very good question. I will be honest and say that even for the first year of being in this role, I kept up my PALS, I kept up my ACLS, and I was an instructor for all of those, and I kept up my TNCC and my ENPC, and I would instruct. And I will be honest, like for a couple of years, I always kept my toe in, like, if I don't like this, I can go back. And it took a while of doing this to really feel comfortable in it and to feel like it was making a difference. And I will say, for me, that is really even just the things that we talk about. 9/11, I'm here in Charlotte, and to the west of us, there's quite a bit going on post-hurricane. It was a little hard to leave, your self-worth is tied up into, I help save lives. That's something that you hang your hat on. Like, I may not be the smartest, the fastest, the prettiest, the whatever, but I help save lives. And it took a while for me to understand that there was a different way to do that. Like, I didn't have to be at the bedside. And to be quite honestly truthful, as we get older, it's harder to be at the bedside for 12 hours, 4 days, 3 to 4 days a week kind of thing. But there's value in the experiences that I've had, and that how can I share those and how can I help others get better at what they're doing. And to Janie's point, I've seen a lot of different things, and this is in no way negative. That first environment where I was a new graduate nurse, where there was a lot of teamwork and there was a lot of collaboration, and we were all on the mindset of we're all here to make this work, is not something I saw everywhere. And I couldn't understand why that was. So having had that experience, I believed that the right training, the right attitude, the right culture, whatever, you can have that somewhere else. And we should be striving to have that everywhere, where we're all responsible for the patient's life. And I'll be honest, I even to this day, I still occasionally will be doing something and I'll have a nurse say something like, well, the doctor didn't ask for that. And I'm like, but did you think the patient needed it? And they're like, well, I'm just the nurse. And I have to go, but we're trained professionals and we're all part of the team. So the confidence came from that years of experience, but I think having a really good environment first, and then kind of seeing other places, and then that whole thing of, I'm not gonna lie, it took a couple of years for me to be like, I'm gonna stay here. I had my toe in it. I was afraid to cut my connections, and I still love my colleagues in the ER. I go see them, and I go do pediatric traumas once a month, and I get to be there, and that I get my fill, and then I go back to the sim center.
I appreciate you answering that question for a lot of reasons. And I think sometimes, yes, when you take a role that's a little bit different, It's hard to sometimes see, what am I truly impacting? What am I really doing? Does it make a difference? And I think resoundingly, now that you've gotten a little bit of experience behind this, you can say with a lot of confidence, yes, I am making an impact. It might be a little bit different than before, but really am able to make those changes that I saw. It's really brave to step out when you don't quite see it. But I'm so glad that now you can say with confidence, yeah, I made the right decision. So I appreciate your answer. Thanks for just, kind of getting out on the limb there with us, because there are probably at least one or two people listening and who will listen to this podcast who are probably being faced with an opportunity. Maybe they don't quite feel like they're ready to take the leap, but it's always nice to hear somebody who did. So thank you, Crystal.
I love it too, Crystal, because it's kind of reminds me of the pay it forward model. Our team is getting ready to read Pay It Forward for our book this last quarter. And I think about you teaching, helping teams learn to collaborate, to work together, to tackle difficult and challenging patient scenarios and situations, and identify patients at the greatest risk and what are their complications and what am I watching for? What do I need? All those things. And so it reminds me of the Pay It Forward model, because you teach 5 people how to work better together, and how many patients are they going to go out and touch?
Yep.
And they are going to tell their teammates, hopefully, and they're going to share what they've learned. And think of all the patients' lives you're actually touching by doing what you do. That's pretty amazing to think about. But I don't suppose it's super easy just to come of a day and say, okay, we're going to walk through a scenario and off we go. So tell us, what is the greatest challenge of creating a good simulation? And I'm really interested too in, not only do we get through the simulation scenario, but then we debrief about it. And we all know that word debrief. We've heard it for however long we've all been nurses. And we know that what some people consider a debrief and what others consider a debrief are vastly different. And I know that's an important aspect of what you do. It's very important to you personally. So tell us, what's involved in that good debrief?
I think particularly there's a couple different aspects of it. Like in the world, particularly when we're talking about working with practicing teammates, I think psychological safety is a really key component of that. There's some other challenges, that come along the way in the world, particularly in like academics and things like that. But even in using healthcare professionals, people some of the times have kind of want to throw the kitchen sink at scenarios or at things. And I'm like, some of the times if we just address one issue at a time, have a sim that only, we only need to have them practice asystole. We don't need to practice asystole, VFib, VTAC, AFib. Like, we don't need to throw them a scenario where they're going to, all the possible things that could kill this patient today or this month. We don't need to do them all in one scenario. Let's just do one. So sometimes that's a challenge. You have to kind of roll people back because they want to do a lot in one spot. And you're like, that doesn't happen in real life. I know you think it does, but patients don't usually have 6 different etiologies going at one time that's going to kill them. A trauma, you can have a polytrauma, that's a little different, but your objectives. But even once you have all of that kind of mindset and you have your curriculum and you have your objectives and that thought process, the bigger challenge is working with teammates. And I say this, it's harder, I think, in my opinion, than it is even in the world of academia, because when you're a nursing student, you expect to get feedback. When you're a med student, you expect that somebody's trying to help grow you and do that sort of thing. When you're out of school and you're on a job, people expect you to know your stuff. So it's very intimidating to practice in front of people because we haven't created a culture of that. We've created a culture of, I'm going to tell you when you've done something wrong, but we haven't created a culture of it's okay to practice, to trip, to struggle. And again, I take it back to sports, and Janie's in Kansas City. So I'm going to use Patrick Mahomes as an example. He practices all week long. Does he throw perfect passes every single day? No, but he feels comfortable in front of his team to get out there and keep trying to throw passes so that he can be perfect on Sunday. How is that? Because that's the culture. That's a psychological safety. It's been set up that's what we're here to do. We're here to get better at what we do. So we spend a lot of time when we're getting ready to do any kind of project with a new group of people, of setting the stage, of talking about psychological safety. What is our purpose here? I can't make you believe it, but I can tell you that my goal today is to create a learning environment where you feel comfortable to make mistakes, where you feel comfortable to ask questions, because that's what we're here for. It's not a real patient. I want you to, whatever issues you have, I want you to identify them today and let us fix them. We also kind of let people understand that simulation is also a little contrived. So I'm asking Janie to come in here and do a sim with Hollye. Well, maybe Janie didn't get a lot of sleep last night and she's a little nervous because I'm watching her because I'm in the sim, or whatever. I know Janie is an exceptional nurse. And if she makes a mistake in sim, sometimes that happens in sim, right? I'm still going to know that when she walks out of here, she's an exceptional nurse. And in fact, I'm going to think more highly of her because she was willing to come in here and practice it. So we try to set up that stage. That's probably the hardest thing, is setting up that stage that we're going to be kind to each other. We're going to trust each other. We're going to give each other the latitude to say, hey, by the way, you're right. I haven't hung dopamine in a really long time. Can we walk through that? Or whatever that may be. Then the next challenge, like you said, Janie, I'll tie that in. The scenario is actually probably one of the easiest parts of it. The next part is us facilitating a debrief where we hold up that culture and that mindset of that it is a safe place. And that's what we're going to do. Doesn't mean I'm not going to tell you that you've done something wrong. It means that we're going to try to identify, tell me more about it, help me understand your perspective, help me understand why you did what you did. Well, were you aware that, the ACLS protocol says that our first thing is defibrillation before we give epi? Well, no, I didn't, because every time I'm here, I see that first thing we do is give epi. You're absolutely right. We do see that a lot, but the protocol says we're supposed to shock the patient first before we give the epi. I didn't know that. Great. Well, now you know that walking out the door. Good job. Congratulations. It's not looking at people and saying, what were you thinking? I hate to blame nursing faculty, but the person with the checklist in the corner who's like, 1 demerit, 2 demerits, whatever be the case. It's not about that. I'm not keeping score. I'm not giving you a grade. We're all colleagues here, and I just want you to walk out of here and be better. But I have to help you walk through it in an organized pattern to even help you reflect and identify. And that's my job as the simulationist, is to help you reflect. And I'll be honest, we've helped do some simulations after some Sentinel events, and teams that have been involved start walking through it and they start identifying for themselves, like where the gap happened and how they start problem solving. Like, if I don't want this to happen again, so how can I make this better? So those are the challenges, is to really, that's probably the biggest challenge, is to really focus on that, keeping yourself and the people that you're working with in a mindset of, we're going to give each other an environment to learn in. We're going to be safe here. We're going to do the best that we can. And I hope, and I'm going to tie this in because I know Janie knows that this is passion. I hope that when we practice psychological safety in sim, that it also then starts to translate into the real work environment, so that if I see that Janie's about to give the wrong medication in the middle of a code, that I feel comfortable saying, hey, Janie, tell me a little bit about what you're about to do. And Janie's not offended. Janie knows that that's just feedback, and she stops and goes, oh, you're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's not like that, we feel comfortable with that and, supporting each other. So that was a lot of talk about that.
Oh, I love it. I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, there's so many places in the world. If we just all could give each other some grace and practice and be able to talk to each other and give each other feedback and be in a safe place with it, think of what we could do as a human people in the world.
Yeah.
I just think that's terrific. And I think that that's something that I hope people are listening to this podcast and they say, oh my gosh, that's the best thing I've ever heard. I want to emulate that. I'm going to get a hold of Crystal, because we need more of that. So we need to be able to help each other, stop each other, give each other feedback in a safe way. That's great. I love that.
I will add this for you guys, that I was a charge nurse for a lot of years, and I'm not going to lie that there were days that I walked into a situation and somebody was doing something, and I probably in my mind was not psychologically safe. I had the what the are you
Yeah.
doing kind of thing, right? And you're in the heat of the moment, and it's you just are like, are you an idiot? Like that's what's you're going through your mind, like what? But the funny thing is when you do sim and you get to kind of step outside of it and you start watching something and you realize that you have an idea, you have a frame, and that's one of the terms that we talk about. I have a frame about why you did what you did. But then when you debrief things and you start listening to why people did things, you're like, oh, that helps me so much. And we use this example a lot when we're trying to explain to people why you debrief everything, even good sim first, like everyone thinks you debrief when people didn't do well. No, you do it when they do well as well. We had a group of clinical nursing students who came in and it was a VFib case. And the first group that came in looked lost, clearly didn't know what the rhythm was. They kind of, scattered around the room trying to figure out what to do, weren't even really doing CPR. One of them finally saw the defibrillator on the cart, got the mannequin on the defibrillator, put it in AD mode, realized they needed to shock the patient. And technically the scenario is over because that was the goal, was for them to fix VFib and shock the patient. We go to debrief them and we're like, hey guys, how'd that feel? It was terrible. Oh my gosh, we're so scared. Okay, well, what was the rhythm? We had no idea. It just looked bad. I had no idea what it was. Okay, well, if you didn't know what the rhythm was, how did you know what to do? And they're like, one girl goes, I saw the box. She didn't call it the defibrillator. She said, I saw the box in the room and I figured I was supposed to use it. And I was like, well, unfortunately, that box is in a lot of rooms and that doesn't mean you need to use it. It's just there, right? So they got the right answer, but really for some bad logic and just some luck, right? A little bit later, a different group came in, but the same scenario. And you can hear the nurses in the room, the nursing students all going, oh my goodness, that's VFib. Oh, let's get CPR going. VFib, we need to shock. Okay, we need to get him on the defibrillator. Yeah, we need to do this. And we're going to need to shock him. And the scenario just kept going. And they kept saying, we need to shock the patient. They're in VFib. And they just wouldn't do it. And we were behind the glass kind of trying to figure out, like, why is this happening? So we finally just had to call the scenario. And technically, they failed because they didn't shock the VFib. But we go into the debrief and we're like, hey guys, how did that feel? Oh, it was very hectic. It was exciting, but that was a bad situation. Yes, it was. What rhythm was that patient in? They were in VFib. Absolutely. Okay, well, per ACLS, what do you need to do? First thing you need to do, early defibrillation. You need to get in there. So we got them all hooked up to defibrillate. Right. I did see that. I saw that you did that. You did a great job. Tell me about why you guys never shock the patient. Help me understand that. Well, one of our preceptors told us that we can't shock a patient unless there's a physician in the room. Okay. They had all the steps right. So technically, again, they didn't get the final objective of defibrillating the patient, but their logic was right all along. They just misunderstood a policy. So those are the exact same scenario with different outcomes. And if you don't ask why people do what they do or why they're thinking what they're thinking, you can, one, fill in the wrong gaps, because I could have gone back to teaching all about rhythms, but second group didn't need to know about rhythms. They knew them. First group did. Second group needed to understand policies, right? And that wasn't even on my objective list. I didn't even realize that it was something that needed to be addressed, right? Because how did I know that they were going to have a preceptor that was going to misguide them? So I think that's part of trying to understand the why behind the what of why someone made the decision they made. And it takes a little of your frustration away because you go to, oh, that's where you were thinking. Okay, we were not on the same page. Nope, not even on the same playbook. Nope, we were not in the same room.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it just reminds me that you may be focusing on the behavior or the thing that the person's about to do, but really understanding what train of thought were they on that then caused that behavior or them to react that way or do that thing that you're just like, no one would ever do that, but you somehow got there. But then when you can kind of dial it back and you can see like, oh, I get it. That thought begat another one. And this is where we ended up at. But that first one, I can understand. I've thought that before. And it kind of brings you back to a place of mutual understanding where it's, okay, I see how we got here now. And let's go back so that we can fix that first, when we took a hard left, when we really should have just stayed straight. You use simulation for a lot of different professionals. So you train nurses, but you have medical providers, respiratory therapists, patient care techs, nursing students. I mean, that's just to name a few. But basically, you're bringing all of these different specialties, all of these different levels of care, all of these different educational backgrounds and experience levels, and you're putting them all in the same room. And you're basically saying, okay, let's try this out. Let's give this scenario a go. But how do you even go about making that possible and kind of setting up a successful outcome when you have so many different perspectives in one room?
I think one of the things for us that is beneficial is that when you're going to bring the group together, it's less about the medical management of the patient, like what is the pathophys behind, what's going on to the very nth detail. It's more about communication. It's more about, do we understand each other's roles? It's more about, do we have all the things we need? And if you kind of, again, in that pre-brief and in setting up that safe environment, you tell people up front, this is not always about knowledge, because I can separate them out and I can teach physicians, hey, when you have this kind of patient, this is the paralytics that you're going to need. And I can take nurses over here and I can say, when you have this kind of patient, this is what physicians are going to want to order. Here's how you have to mix it up, because we all know physicians don't know how to, they just like to order it, and then you have to magically as a nurse make it happen, or the pharmacist makes that happen, right? But when you come together, it's those kind of things. So we'll often take kind of the pressure off of people and be like, hey, today's scenario, we want to make sure that this room and your team is ready to take care of a patient. So our main focus, we're going to talk a little bit about the medical management of the patient, but our main focus is like what you guys need as a team. And yes, we're going to be watching them, but we tell them we want them to be thinking about it. We try to set them up and say, your participants come to this and help us identify what's working well and what's not working well. And, even sometimes with that environment, it never fails. The nurses who are drawing up the meds are in that far corner of the trauma room or the resuscitation room, and the resident or the attending physicians at the foot of the bed, which is like the furthest point away. And there's a whole lot of things going on in between them, right? And just to help, like, as you're kind of going through your debrief, being like, or hi, med nurse, were you able to completely hear what the physician at the head of the bed was saying? And I can say, you didn't talk loud enough at the head of the bed, right? But they don't hear that as well as somebody who was in the corner that was like, I could not hear you. I asked 3 times for you to repeat the order. It just was so hard. And then somebody else will come up with an idea and go, hey, I'm the scribe nurse. I probably should have asked people to be more quiet because I heard you ask 3 times. Like, for people to uncover it for themselves and do it, it's so much better than me to go, hey, you're really quiet as a team lead, and that you could see that the team struggled. It's so much better, and they can start talking. And then the team lead can say, I didn't realize that. I'll try to speak up, but I'll also, next time I do this, I'll ask, can everybody hear me in this situation? Or it's the little like dynamics and teammate kind of things of that, of bringing people together, but helping them. Hey, it took a long time for you, because we do a lot of pediatric trauma. So obviously drawing meds is challenging, right? But like, hey, are there resources? Did you know what your resources are? Did you know there are drug sheets in the room? Did you have the right weights? And one of the things we identified a while ago is, and they've updated, is our drug sheets didn't have ketamine. Well, ketamine started being a more popular med that was being used in resuscitations. Well, through the SIMS, we realized that resource wasn't there. So that medication was taking significantly longer to get drawn up because they couldn't find it. Great. That's no skin off of the med nurse's back. That's just a thing that we can take back to leadership and administration and say, here's a process that might be better. Can you create a drug sheet to help, for the weights and things, so that we can speed up the preparation of ketamine in a pediatric patient and take some of the mental workload off of our med nurse, so that she or he's not stressed out about getting ketamine drawn up.
I mean, I think you hit on a couple of just like key points about not only creating this safe environment, but being able to break down barriers in communication, opening up the lines of communication and realizing, I'm not trying to question your order. I'm not trying to question your skill or your understanding. I really just can't hear you. I think practicing those things in an environment where a patient's life isn't on the line, what it does is again, hopefully they take it out of the SIM center and then they drop it into a real patient encounter where everyone in that room feels a little bit more comfortable about, hey, I need you to speak up. Can't really hear you. Things are very busy. Hey, can you grab that drug sheet? And I need it to be able to, it makes it so that I feel safe asking for what I need to take care of the patient. And even if you don't understand, you've been in a situation outside of there and you've had those exchanges and those times of communication, and it was okay. Nobody thought differently about me that I didn't know that there. And so I feel safer to ask questions. I feel safer to give feedback in a real patient encounter. And to Janie's point earlier, what better place for us to truly be a cohesive team than when a patient, someone's loved one is in our care, and the decisions that we make and the care that we give will truly impact their lives and the lives of people who love them. What better place for us to be a really good team? Like, we're talking all the way to the finals, like we're going to come out with a ring. What a better place for us to have practiced and worked really hard to be that kind of team for that patient and their family. So I love your team scenario. I love how you've kind of just shaped it around something that I feel like most people in healthcare, we can understand. It's really important when everything's on the line, but we got to be able to practice, and that's going to make us better. So thanks for sharing all that, Crystal. I'll turn it back over to Janie now.
Yeah. Okay, well, Crystal, this is such good stuff. I hope people are listening thinking, wow, I am going to steal shamelessly from these best practices.
Absolutely.
So now I would love to hear, I know we all would love to hear you tell us about a person or a moment in your career that had a great impact on you.
I've had several, but I think probably the one that always sticks out in my mind is we had a significant burn patient come in when I was a very young nurse, and everyone was busy doing their work and I was trying to get a line. I was cross-training in the burn center, and we were just trying to go through the motions of everything that you do. And the most experienced burn unit nurse kind of walked up and started talking with the patient and started explaining that the injury that he had sustained really wasn't compatible with life, even though he was, obviously awake and talking to us. But it was a significant enough burn that, she was just very matter of fact walking through, what's going to happen is you're going to start having third spacing. We're going to have to intubate you for your lungs, but your body's going to start to shut down this whole process. And, we're going to want to keep you comfortable and stuff like that. But before that happens, she asked, do you have someone you want to call? Do you have someone you want to work with? And she was able to call, and he was able to talk to his family that were like in several states away. And they actually were able to run down the street and get like a brother on the phone and everything like that. And then, it's a short interaction. And then the next little bit, we intubated the patient, and the process of a significant third-degree burn took its path, and the family was able to fly out. One of the things they talked about is how grateful they were that they'd had that opportunity to talk to him, how grateful they were that they got to, tell each other that they loved each other. And it was the moment that I realized a couple things. One, it's not about the tasks. It's just not about all the things that we do, like the medical things we do. Yes, we know those are important. We know those are our jobs, and we need to be really, really good at those. But we also need to know that the end goal is that there's a patient and there's a family, and the things that we do are, at some point we have to own when, like, we're not going to fix what we're doing, no matter how good of a team we are. And I think that's it, when I first understood that there's a good way to die, and that we, some of the times, particularly in the emergency department, because that's how we're trained, right? Like, you bring us the worst, baddest, nastiest trauma, whatever, we're going to do everything we can to save your life. And then we're going to ship you off somewhere else that they can take care of you longer, right? We just need to keep you alive. But that's not always the end product, right? And I think that gave me back some humanity, and it helped me understand that what we're doing, that there's a time and a place that, yes, I need to do all these medical things. And again, I said, I kind of transitioned into pediatrics, and I think in the world of pediatrics, we're much more passionate about families being present in codes. And that's another area where, like, sim is really great, because people get to practice, and they get to practice their communications and get more comfortable with that sort of thing. That kind of led up to where I am. Like, I'm not going to force anyone. I'm not going to drag anyone into a room. But if a mother wants to be present for the last minute of her child's life, that's her prerogative. And my comfort as a healthcare provider does not matter. Like, what she needs, I can't fix her child at this point. I can give her the best possible outcome as well. And that all built from that first time of watching, I'll name her out. Maggie Rogers was an incredible, experienced nurse, and I still remember her to this day, that I have to have courage as a healthcare provider, that part of my job is to tell families the truth in a kind way, and to give them the best opportunity to have the best end outcome, even if that's not life.
Crystal, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for honestly just being mindful and vulnerable enough to talk about something that really impacted you and that you carry with you as one of those life lessons. And it really does shape the way that you approach every patient, especially those who are in those just critical moments, realizing that this may be the last time that they get to talk to their loved ones. This may be that moment that's sealed in someone's brain, not just my own. And how can I best facilitate what would be their ideal end, whatever that might be. And you're right. I think in the emergency department, it's very easy to get focused on, the task and the protocols and the things we have to check. Like, I know it. I've definitely been, faulted into it. Like, you go into like default mode. And some of that's good muscle memory, but you can't just use your muscles. Like, you have to use your heart, you have to use your connection and the humanity in order to really take care of that whole person, and not just the things on the monitor or the the injuries that you see, but like the whole entire person and patient. So thank you for sharing that. I'm beyond certain that anyone who hears this story, they'll walk away remembering that for sure. Well, I get the chance to ask you a few rapid fire questions.
Okay.
I like to say this is like the best part of the podcast, but honestly, it's just because it goes by really quick. It's a lot of questions we fire at you. But I feel like the best part of the cast is actually way before this, since we've had such good conversation. But now I'm going to jump in, rapidly firing some questions at you. So if there was a career outside of healthcare that you would have want to try, what would it be?
As I've gotten older, I wish that I could pay my mortgage being a gardener. I'm not that good of a green thumb. I like to play at it, but I don't think that I could sustain myself if I tried to be a gardener, but I would really like to be.
I have some plants currently that are negatively impacted by my lack of green thumb, but I do also, like you, I like to try. I give it my best effort. We'll put that as a hobby, but unfortunately I would love it to be a career. So, all right, 3 favorites I've got coming at you. And this can be all-time favorite, or it can just be something current that you'd like to recommend. So, favorite book?
All time is still Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah, my kiddo read that to her a few different times. Man, that's good. Whimsical and just fun. So if you haven't read that, it's a short read. Favorite? Okay, this can be movie, TV show, or it can be like a binge-worthy series, which we're always on the lookout for.
Unfortunately, I'm of the age group. I was like 5 or 6 when Star Wars came out, And that was just the most amazing thing to me in the world. I was like, wow. And, I may or may not be able to quote that movie pretty well. The only other movie I can quote probably better, and you can appreciate this, Hollye, is Steel Magnolias. So
Drink your juice, Shelby. Yes, several of my brothers really enjoyed Star Trek, Star Wars. Obviously, if you're into either one of those, you know the difference. So don't confuse the two. But the good neat thing about both of those, actually, both Star Trek and Star Wars, is there is a lot of movies out there, a lot of shows. So that'll pretty much fill up your calendar. If you've never heard of these, you're gonna have a very full TV movie situation just based off of that. And also Steel Magnolias, if you haven't seen that, just go, do that now. All right, next up, favorite musical artist, or it can just be like genre of music that you really enjoy or that you recommend.
Again, I'm showing my age. I really like 80s hair bands. Very much a Linkin Park fan for a lot of years. But I find that where I stop the radio or Pandora tends to be like 80s, early 90s stuff. So I'm just going to own it.
You should own it. Yeah, it really, actually, I find it very frustrating that what used to be kind of like the, not classic rock, but it was like, we play the classics. Like now they're starting to play like my music. And I'm like, stop it. Stop it. Just say that you're just playing great music. Don't try to call it classic or vintage. Don't do that. That's the stuff my dad listened to. All right. What is a self-care go-to or a hobby outside of healthcare that just helps you reset, kind of get back to where you can then go on and be the best version of yourself and show up for all the people who are dependent on you? So what's one of those?
Well, it goes back to I will go out and get in dirt some way, shape, or form. I will go play in dirt. And I will talk to little plants and beg them to, please bloom, please continue to grow. And I'll talk to the little bees flying around my plants. And, I'm sure people are wondering if I need a psych hold or something like that. But I get out in the dirt. That's how I recharge and get right with the world.
I feel like my plants do listen to me, because there will be days when I don't get to spend time with them. And then I go out there and I'm like, what's wrong? What's happening? And then, you know what? After a little care and conversation, they start turning it around. So I do not fault you on that approach, because I have seen it work with my own eyes. So, all right. If our audience would like to follow you online, what social media platforms are you on, or how can they reach out to you, Crystal?
I'm on LinkedIn, and my email address and stuff like that is on, if you do a Google search of Carolina Simulation Center, our whole team is listed on there, and it has my email address. And I get emails all the time from people all over the place, and I'm happy to email or, set up a time to talk with someone on a Teams call. That's the beauty of the simulation community as a whole. I think people are very sharing, and they want to give you things. They want to help you be successful in what you're doing.
I will include those links both to your LinkedIn and to the Atrium website. So that way people can have a chance. If they want to reach out, they will have your contact information. So thanks for sharing that with us, Crystal. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, Crystal, I just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us today and all of our listeners. We are so grateful to have you on the BCEN and Friends podcast. And I just, on a personal note, because we've known each other a long time, we used to work as nurses together in one of those trauma centers you mentioned a while back. But I would just like to tell you that you are someone I personally know has made a difference for so many, countless people for so long, and you're going to continue to do that. And the best way I know that is because when my son, who's now 25, was a small boy, he got pretty sick, and I brought him to the emergency department one of the 2 times he's been in his life. And you were there, and you came right out to triage us, and you brought him right back because you could also see that he was very sick. And I just remember feeling such a sense of relief that everything was going to be okay because Crystal was there. And so that's the impression that you leave on people. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. And thank you for everything you do every day. And thanks for continuing to make that huge difference in the world. And we are, again, so grateful to have had you on today. Thank you.
Well, I want to take this time to thank Crystal for joining us for this episode of BCEN and Friends. Thank you, Crystal, for sharing your time, your experiences, your knowledge, all of the things that you're doing in simulation training, and your passion for nursing and healthcare. Your career is inspiring for the kindness you show others and the compassion to help them become better in every area of their professional practice. We truly appreciate you and all that you're doing. And to all of our listeners, we hope you will stay tuned with us as we continue with BCEN and Friends and bring you new, meaningful content and perspective. If you have a suggestion for an episode, please email us at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Hollye Briggs here with Janie Schumaker, and on behalf of the entire BCEN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.